let's talk about the Dilbert Curse. You guys are aware of Dilbert, aren't you? Scott Adams got in a bit of trouble.
Yeah, actually, I've got Scott Adams on next week's Brokenomics.
Brilliant.
He's the mug guy, right?
Yeah,
Mug guy.
yeah, the mug guy who
That's all I can say about that.
who got cancelled for making a point.
He got cancelled a good few times actually, but one of them,
the most recent
one.
cancellation, because he made some points about crime and demographics, and these didn't go down well. And this is something that, unfortunately, and I really mean this because this is actually a really tragic thing to have happen. The prediction that he made about Democrat cities and the people living in them is coming true, and it's not good. So before we go on, I predicted all of this in my Deep Think Rousseau Savage. John, if you can log out just so people can see the new button, because I'm very proud of this new button. I think this is great. So you can subscribe for £5 a month and listen to this if you're a silver tier subscriber and get the audio, or you can read it. And if you don't want to subscribe, you can buy the full thing. And trust me, this is worth it, because what I'm doing there, can we go back to that? Yeah, it's £1.89. But what I'm doing in this is explaining in detail why the Democrat areas of America are trapped in the Rousseauian paradigm of liberalism. As in, this is full scale, non-stop. We are all unique individual savages who live in the urban jungle liberalism. And this is why this is going to continue. So let's go on to Scott Adams' prophecy. In 2020, as you can see, he says if Biden is elected, there's a good chance you'll be dead within the year. And then he underneath, Republicans will be hunted. Well, that's kind of happened, actually, isn't it? I mean, look at that's happening to Donald Trump. But okay, so it's not within the year. It was within 2 years. Maybe 3 years, we'll call it. Okay, fair enough. To that, there's a chap called Josh Kruger. As you can see from his bio, award-winning / losing writer. Him.
That is an interesting bio.
HIV plus.
That means he's got HIV, right?
I assume so.
Okay.
Right. Loves his cat and his bike. And he writes for the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Philadelphia Citizen, and LGBTQ Nation, and other fine publications. I don't know why he didn't list the fine publications in his bio, but there we go.
So he doesn't mention it in his bio, but I think it's safe to assume that he is a Biden voter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm going to give you some quotes
in
a minute, in fact. But yeah, so this is the kind of chap who probably doesn't like Donald Trump. And you can imagine what his response to Scott Adams was. The Dilbert dude is like Nostradamus. Look at this prediction from 2020. Wow, eerie. As you can see, Scott Adams' response under that.
Oh, wait, that's September 30th. That's only...
He posted that the other day. Yeah.
Right.
And the day after this, he was shot to death.
Wow.
As the post-millennial tell us, Josh Kruger, leftist activist and journalist, which is a fair characterization of him, was shot and killed inside his home on Monday. He had a long history of downplaying violent crime in the city, often openly mocking those who expressed concerns about homicides in Philadelphia. Here are some quotes. Look, it's that lawless land of liberals in Philly where shootings are dropping to levels not seen in years. Some idiot just said that you're more likely to get shot and killed than die of COVID in Philly to make some insensitive rhetorical point for his side. Folks, 4 times as many Philadelphians have died of COVID than gunshots this year. I mean, to be honest with you, that's hardly an endorsement of anything, is it? You know, if 400 people die of COVID, well, that means just that only 100 people were shot to death.
Well, and I doubt that number anyway.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But because I understand math is hard to understand. And so, yeah, it's...
But that's remarkable. That's within 48 hours of him mocking Scott.
Yeah.
He is brutally murdered inside his home.
Yeah.
By the exact phenomena which he was mocking.
Yes. He was recognized by the LGBTQ plus advisory committee as a comrade who never stopped advocating for queer Philadelphians living on the margins of society. He was described as the Philadelphia district attorney as an openly queer writer who wrote about his own journey surviving substance abuse disorder and homelessness. Not great, right? So let's go to the ABC reporting. And they say he was shot 7 times inside his own home at 1:30 a.m. He died at the hospital 45 minutes later. There's no word on a motive for his shooting, and no arrests have been made.
There's probably no good reason either. Probably just look at that guy. Don't like the look of him.
Who knows?
Why not?
Who knows?
In his own home.
Could have been a boyfriend. Could have been a gang initiation.
Well, they say there were no signs of forced entry, so it could have been like a boyfriend or somebody picked up at a club or something like that. Who knows, right? Who knows? But the point is, crime in Philadelphia, not my problem. The next one is a chap called Ryan Carson. I'm not going to play the video. There is a video of this, and it's awful, absolutely awful. He sat on a bench at like 3:30 in the morning, just sitting there with his girlfriend, and they're just, they've obviously been out, and an urban man walks past, and nothing happens. They get up, they go to leave, then the urban man notices them, starts flipping out, pulls out a knife, and then goes to stab him. He puts himself heroically between his girlfriend and the man, and gets just stabbed to death in literally a couple of seconds. He's just laying there, and the guy runs off. It's just like, okay.
So this whole phenomena is whatever it was, like 6 years ago. I was living in London, had a small child, and just thought, no, I am not living in London with a small child. Right, and that was London, let alone these places. Yeah,
Ryan Carson worked as the senior solid waste campaign director at the nonprofit New York Public Interest Research Group. He led several left-wing advocacy movements, basically. He was described as one of the rising stars in our organization. Wonderful person, hardworking, boisterous laugh. Everyone loved him. I'm sure they did. I'm absolutely sure they did. He did like this charity walk to help raise money and things like this. But of course, long-time left-wing activist, and gets killed by the sort of demographic that he's currently advocating against police action for. Okay. I mean, this continues. This is not the only ones. Remember the Democrat woman, Shivathi Sandra, I can't pronounce her name, but you'll probably recognize the picture of her. I can't scroll down, never mind. You'll probably recognize the picture of her if there is one in here. Surprised there's no picture of her because she was very noticeable. Okay, never mind. But the point is, she got attacked because she was a defund the police advocate. She gets attacked, and then she's like, oh, wait, actually, we need the police to protect us from the violent criminals that actually we've been busy trying to get out of jail. Because it turns out that it wasn't all right-wing racist propaganda, that actually there's a problem with violence in some communities, and perhaps they should be punished for the crimes they commit. This is really, really happening. I mean, the worst example of this, I think, is this, right? Where this, I think there's scroll down, there's a picture. Yeah, there we go, right? That guy there was shot in the head by a career criminal when he was on his way to his high school reunion. That's Christopher Wright, who's 38, prominent businessman, beloved dad, and I believe it. He was shot at close range in the head by Darryl Roberts, 57, who had been arrested at least 60 times. Somehow still out on the streets.
Well, because people in that area voted for policies that resulted in somebody being arrested 60 times and then let out.
And this is just a perpetual problem with the left. And this really is what I've been driving at. And this is why, like, going back to the deep thing, this is the bit that's important about it, right? Because the entire worldview of the Democrats and the Republicans is bifurcated on one issue. It comes down to one fundamental assumption. Is man born good and made bad by society? Or is man born made bad and made good by society?
I'd go with the latter.
Well, exactly. You will go with the latter, right? Yeah. Because it's obviously true.
Yes.
Right? People who have had no restrictions and no particular reason to care about one another will do bad things because they'll have no conscience about it, right?
Well, we're not angels dragged to earth. We're animals aspiring to the heavens. I mean, it's...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the total opposite way that they view these things. And so, and this thesis underpins all of their activism towards minority groups. Oh, look at the poor criminal. Oh, well, what happened to him? How did we make him bad? Because just assume, he would have been a good person, were it just not for the systemic oppression or racism or poverty.
Do we think that they actually believe this
Yes,
stuff?
100%, which is why they're getting murdered in the street.
I think I can help with that explanation because it's not exactly in that wording, of course.
No, of course.
People don't think in...
Of course it's not in that wording.
Yeah, the way philosophers actually think, because philosophers are all insane in the way they write compared to the average person.
But that is the underlying
to explain that in like how a human being would talk about it, is I think it's like Mr. Z on YouTube. I forget. He did it pretty well. Where he explained that you have people who live in the countryside and people who live in the cities, and that's the real divide in the West for all the Anglo countries. And the people in the countryside's response to criminals is, we need to kill them because otherwise they will kill us.
Yeah.
And in the cities, it's a question of, no, but we can reform him.
Yeah.
Like, why should someone be put to death when we can change them and therefore no one has to die and they can be a benefit to society? It's like, but that's insane.
But what you're
Going to kill you.
But what you're doing there as well is you're abnegating their moral responsibility for their own actions.
He must be good on the inside.
Exactly. And even if he did something wrong, it's someone else's fault that he chose to do something wrong. He doesn't bear the burden of guilt for that thing that he did. That's the problem.
But they're not logically consistent, because if somebody who looks like us were to say something they disagree with, they won't say, "Oh, you're good, but society led you astray." They say that you are fundamentally and morally corrupt.
It is a form of paternalistic racism. Yes.
Yes.
The Longhouse impact there. In the chat, someone was just like, I can fix him. So
it kind of
the Longhouse opinion on criminals versus the
well, it is a very feminine way of approaching the subject. It's like, oh, but we don't want them to suffer. It's like, no, actually, I think that when someone does something utterly terrible, like say shoot a father of 3 in the head in the middle of the street in the middle of the day, actually, I think suffering is a genuinely desirable outcome for that person. I think there's a cosmic balance that's unbalanced at the moment, and it needs to be
incredibly infantilizing. A mix of infantilization and racism at the same time, because the reason they would come after us for the things they say is because they assume that we're fully adult, and therefore we know our own minds, and therefore we're irredeemable.
Yeah.
Whereas even if you're a 60-year-old man from this demographic, you're still a child, and they can just modify you.
Yeah, literally Daryl Roberts. I mean, can you imagine on his 40th time of being let off of whatever crimes he's committed?
Yeah,
it's being like, well, I guess they're just never going to punish me. Like I occupy.
If he even thought in those terms,
assuming he has a single thought in his head, he must be like, I occupy some position of privilege.
Yeah,
like I'm beyond the law. Is the only, and the thing is, it's entirely rational for him to think this way. It's totally rational.
You know how you think that the government has? You've seen movies and they've got like secret agencies and blah 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 or whatever ability to stop you, and then when you bump up against something in reality and you notice there's no actual barrier there, and that'll happen in various different ways in your life.
Yeah.
He had that with the
60 times that he gets arrested. Yeah.
And just notice there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And at which point, I mean, everyone's had that happen. You start bending the rules or just ignoring them.
But also,
it's forever.
It's not even that this is concealed either, right? There's a loud activist movement that was raising funds to get people bailed in order that they didn't suffer any penalties and things like that. And like all of the Black Lives Matter protesters are just, essentially forgiven or let off, even if they were arrested in the first place. And you've got to be like, okay, the civilization is encouraging us to continue down this road. Like there are no, like you said, there are no hard barriers to come up against. Like, okay, if every time you were arrested for a violent crime, you got 10 lashes, I bet you'd see a massive drop off of violent crime.
Well, Singapore, they give you lashes. There's no crime.
There we go. Right, because these people obviously don't care about the law conceptually as an abstract concept in the same way that you and I do. So, okay, well, then we need a real way of making sure they're not committing these crimes. But of course, what I'm suggesting is literally the worst thing I could suggest to one of these poor victims, like one of these leftist advocates. They're like, you are cruel. You are evil. How could you want these people to suffer? So, because in suffering is the lesson that they will learn that you can't impart to them any other way. That's the only way they're going to.
Well, I mean, what we're trying to do is they're trying to decrease suffering in the moment. We're trying to decrease suffering over the long term, including for this community.
It's more than that, actually. We're trying to decrease suffering for innocent people.
Yeah.
Right? They're not. They're trying to decrease suffering entirely. And so if they let 10 criminals out of jail and only 3 of them go on to murder someone new, well, then as far as they're concerned, there's 7 innocent people up because nobody can really be guilty. Like this, the entire worldview of the left is encapsulated in Rousseau, and it is mad.
It's a really dark thought, but I've got to wonder, that guy who shot 7 times, I can imagine how that went. I mean, it probably wouldn't have been a rapid fire. It would have been, a shot, he fell over a sofa, he started crawling away, another shot through a door. The whole thing could have taken 15 minutes to play out. I got to wonder, in his head, did he think to himself, my entire worldview is bollocks, and it brought me to this?
Well, that's the question that Wilfred Riley here is asking. And I thought it might be worth having a quick discussion on it, because he says, now that well-off white leftists are starting to die, the anti-police movement, which doubled the black murder rate, is probably over. So, well, is it, though? Right? Because that's the question, isn't it? Do these people have this kind of road to Damascus moment where they're like, oh, wait, everything about this was wrong, and actually the people who commit crime should be punished? Do they think that, or are they thinking,
didn't Anna Kasparian start down
this is
road?
Precisely the road Anna Kasparian went down? Didn't she get sexually assaulted outside of a house by a homeless person? And then there was something else as well. And then they were like, right, you're not.
But it was all near her house.
Yeah.
It has to be that close for these people to come back to reality.
Yeah.
And a little bit wider on this, the city versus rural aspect really sticks out to me. And something you get annoyed with is when you see people talking about reintroducing violent, deadly animals to the UK when we don't have them. And you get the same dichotomy there where you talk to rural people who go hunting or whatever. It's like, yes, we kill them because otherwise they'll kill us.
Who go for walks in the countryside. They don't want wolves out there.
And then you get the city people who argue for, oh no, but we can
rewild the countryside so biodiversity is improved. So how about you?
It's just an abstract concept.
Yeah, exactly. And so the question is, will they actually double down on what they've created and say, no, we are the ones at fault for not having, I don't know, submitted enough or reformed them enough or something? Or are they going to suddenly be like, okay, maybe the Republicans have a point on law and order? What do you think?
When it's at their door.
If
they live, then yeah, they might learn a lesson. But until then, I really think living in a city really warps your mind in a way that's unusual. And the evidence of that is in the voting patterns.
There's got to be a spectrum. I remember reading about a Swedish family who were delighted when their daughter started dating a fresh refugee, and he ended up beating their daughter to death with a fire extinguisher. And the parents of the girl went to his trial to plea for leniency to this boy.
I've seen similar.
So there are some people who it's neurological hardwiring at this point. The leftism.
Well, a lot of people reply to this saying, well, look, we're not dealing with a rational philosophy. What we're dealing with is a faith. And so I think a lot of people on the right are like, look, we think these people are going to double down and essentially view themselves as martyrs in the same way the early Christians would have done. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case.
I got to wonder if the child angle makes an aspect, because you notice with voting patterns, young white women vote a
Democrat while the
moment they have kids, their voting intention skews significantly to the right, because for the first time they're thinking about somebody other than themselves.
Quite possibly.
And I got to wonder, does that happen with when it's you feeling slightly uncomfortable walking home because you see some joggers or whatever it is, and then you start to think, okay, no, maybe I'm at fault. But when you're scared for your kids' safety, and kids in your neighborhood start having seriously unpleasant things happen to them, will that shift them? I'd like to think so, but
it would be nice if it did. But I think a lot of it is genuinely down to a sort of it would be a titanic emotional shift for these people. Yeah. That's the thing, because as far as they're concerned, they're essentially saviors, and okay, something terrible might happen to me, but I'm doing my part for social justice. I'm making a better world. Things like this, right?
To be fair, we have some good evidence that for a white pill there, which is the busing of migrants from Texas to cities.
Yeah, that's true.
It's had its impact. I mean, sincerely,
but that didn't change their opinions, though, right? I bet they'll still vote for exactly the same policies.
Well, that's the interesting thing. I mean, how many years do you have to run that experiment? Maybe it never happens and the change doesn't happen. But if America wants to fix its problems, it's got to keep moving those problems into the cities and let them live it.
Yes. I mean, I guess we'll see how New York votes next time it votes, since they were like, this is going to cost us £1 billion a year. And it's like, well, that's cute, isn't it? It's costing us £3 billion. So, but anyway, the point being, I personally think that they're going to double down on this, which is awful. They're just going to essentially treat these people as disposable. Which and I just another quick thing. I see a lot of people on the right kind of laughing, haha, a journalist has been murdered by a black guy because who was anti-gun. It's like, look, I mean, yeah, okay, but it's gross to laugh at the murder of anyone, and it's like I don't see these people as being agents really now. The sort of leftist cultist types. I see, and I went to a conference in Miami, and Curtis Yarvin gave a great talk actually, and one of the key things I took away from it is, look, the right doesn't really have a way of governing the libs. If you want to own the libs, you've actually got to have a philosophy about how life can be, and you've got to actually want to help them. And this is, I think, revealed by this particular kind of thing. We've got segments on the right who are genuinely actually like, look, we need to save these people from themselves. And then other sections on the right who are like, ha ha ha, you get what you deserve. And I actually really don't want to be in the get what you deserve part, because actually it's kind of cold, right? Really cold.
I got to say, part of me went to that reaction when I've heard this news.
It's hard not to.
Yeah.
Right? It's genuinely hard not to, because like, well, you voted for this over and over and over. You stigmatized all of us for being like, look, man, something terrible could happen to you.
Yeah.
But when you remember this person is essentially a cultist who's following a messianic creed.
And I've given your question some more thought. I think what's going to happen is there is a spectrum of people, like you say, for whom this is a faith. And I think what's probably going to happen is the people on the right side of this spectrum are going to start to realize, and they're going to move away. They're going to go from Portland to Florida or whatever it is. They're going to peel out, and the group that are left are going to be more concentrated. So they will double down, because the amount of reality it takes to affect the people on the far end of the spectrum is basically a level of reality that ends up with them getting shot 7 times. So they never reach it. So yeah, by definition, the decision makers in these cities will concentrate down to the most fanatical of this faith.
Entirely possible. But anyway, so that's just the sad events of the Dilbert Curse. Don't mock what Scott Adams's opinions, because it doesn't turn out well for a lot of people.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content that's on the site, such as the Contemplation series, this episode on right-wing wokeism, part 1. If you'd like to find out what else is being put out, you can follow on Getter at lotuseaters_com on Getter. Thank you and goodbye.